painting layer. And I love the warmth that kind of shines through. So I'm going to do that again today. So I'm going to get my brush not soaking wet, but I'm adding a little bit of water to this paint just to thin it out enough to get it easy to spread. And I'm going to make this blob cover the whole page. So I'm just going to dip in water as I need to, enough to thin it, but I don't want to have a soaking wet page. I want it to dry pretty quickly. So I'm just going to spread it lightly, and then I can add water as I go, thin it out, and I want to get this whole background coated. I don't mind the brushy marks either. Those, kind of come with the territory when you're doing a thin glaze coat, and it also adds a little bit of texture to your background as well. Got a little paint lump there that I think came from the lid. I'm just going to brush that off and then get the rest of this all covered. And I'm just getting right up to the edges of my tape. All right, I'm going to let this dry and then I'll be right back. All right, I am back. We are dry completely. And I think what I want to do is a little bit of an abstract landscape. And I've been really kind of digging the Southwest themed landscapes, but I don't want to do a realistic one. I did find a photo reference, and it's kind of funny because I've tried a couple of landscapes recently, but they always seem to turn out a little bit too representational. So I really want to focus this time on making kind of a whimsical, just painting that we can do some mark making on and just have some fun adding some texture and pattern. The main thing for me is I want to get some values, and I found this really cool photo of a couple of cactuses or cacti in the desert. So I am going to kind of embrace that. And I'm going to start out by putting in my sky because that is the biggest part of the background. Now I'm going to kind of make the background a little bit uneven so that we have a little bit of interest there. And I'm making the sky nice and bright. And so I mixed a tiny bit of turquoise with plenty of white, and I'm even going to add some more white still. And I'm just going to make it a nice, bright, high value sky. Light value sky, I guess I could say. And so I'm just going to focus on that, getting a good coat of paint up here at the top. I'm mixing into my turquoise and just making sure I get it nice and bright. I'm working my brush to kind of blend it a little bit as I go. And I can also add a little bit of water if I need to. And I think this turquoise is going to be a really nice match for that sky. Now I'm just going to kind of go slowly back and forth to eliminate a little bit of the brush strokes. And I can always come in for a second coat later. But I am going to just lightly go over this with my brush, and I kind of like that sort of streaky white look that could almost be a little bit of clouds in the sky. So I'm definitely going to embrace that and start at the edge and just slowly kind of blend it so we have a nice interesting background. And there'll be a little bit of that burnt sienna kind of peeking through and warming up, but I think that's just going to add to some of the interest in this painting. And then I'm just going to add a little bit more here along the bottom where our sky meets the ground. And I'm going to make that the part with the most contrast. So I'm going to have pretty heavy white here. I'm even grabbing it kind of straight from the pan or the plate, the palette. whatever. I tend to focus so much on doing what I'm doing that I tend to lose my words when I'm doing these videos. It's kind of funny. Okay, I think I really like how that looks, and we have a really nice base to go on here. So I'm lower than center. Now the photo reference I'm giving you is much higher. And also, it is a landscape-oriented photo. What I did was I zoomed in a bit, and I've got my phone kind of sitting up next to me that I can look at while I'm painting. So I will put the photo reference on the screen, and then also link to it below. It is from Unsplash, which is free images. They are not, restricted for use or anything. So it's really nice to use for references when, I don't live in the desert, but I love desert landscapes. And you might think of a desert as being just so barren, but there is so much life in the desert. And so that is just really something. So I'm going to grab my smaller filbert brush, and I'm going to mix a little bit of a lighter sort of sand color that we can have for the background. So I am going to add in some of this lemon yellow to some white, and I'm going to add another little touch of the burnt sienna. Now I'm just putting a tiny little dab on my palette, and I'm just going to put it in here to kind of tone down that yellow and white mixture. And I'm just going to add it a little bit at a time until we get kind of a nice little bright, sunny, sandy color. And I think I kind of like that. That looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to add a little bit of water because I want this to be a little more of a glaze on top of that burnt sienna background. So I am going to thin this out a bit. And I probably will also do a little bit of dabbing with my paper towel. So I'm just going to brush this on pretty loosely. Make sure I'm getting the edges pretty well. I'm leaving some open spaces here. Now I've got this yellow. I am going to add a little bit of blue to it, and a little bit more of this burnt sienna to kind of make a desaturated grayish brown. And I am going to add this in a glaze over our little distant mountains, just like that. And it's kind of a cool neutral. So what I'm going to do is take my spray bottle. I'm going to do just a light spritz, and you can see it sort of lighten up exactly where that paint is that's still wet. So what I'm going to do is grab my paper towel and give it a good press, and we have some wonderful texture there. That's nice. I am going to grab my brush again and do a little bit of lightening up. So I'm going to grab some more of this white and just kind of mix it off to the side here with the rest of my colors. And I'm going to do the same thing again. And we're just going to make this nice and abstract. But we're going to use some textures to really help us with the neutrals here. And we can even add a little bit more of that turquoise and tone down that background a bit. Just have a little bit of fun with the colors. I'm adding just a little hint of blue here to those mountains, and I think that looks pretty cool. So I'm going to give it another little spritz while it's still damp and do the same thing with a lift. And I'm even going to get up into the sky area a bit, I think. I really love that texture. So I'm definitely I'm just going to kind of flip over my paper towel a bit and do a little bit of removal here as well. And I love that effect. I think that's really cool. And you can see that sort of sky background, and you can see some of that burnt sienna coming through, and we've got plenty of texture for the next part of our painting. So I'm just going to let this dry off a little bit and then we'll come back for the next layer. All right, I am back and our page is dry now, so I'm going to go on to the next step and work on some of the background landscape, and I'm going to keep it very simple. I'm going to mix my color first, I think, and I'm going to do a nice sort of bright green color with a little bit of the burnt sienna and a little bit of the white, and I'm going to make kind of a nice little desaturated green here, and I really like how that looks. And I'm just going to add some different visual interest items, like some blobs for the plant, maybe some background cactus. And I'm going to steer clear of those mountains in the background. I'm also going to do kind of a little horizon line in a way and just give myself a bit of a guide. And I want to get some variation in my shapes and use my brush at different angles. Make sure to get, from the side, maybe straight down, maybe make some pretty big blobby shapes. And then I want to go in and change up the color a bit. Maybe make it a little bit lighter, a little bit more neutral. I might add some yellow here to kind of warm it up a bit. And I think I like this color quite a bit. And I'm just going to kind of go over here. Now we have the sun coming from this direction, so I am going to kind of go along the right side of some of these and add almost some sort of sunny spots, but I'm just doing very basic marks. Now I'm going to add a little bit more of that burnt sienna, add some brown in here, and just make it nice and blobby with lots of texture. And I really like how this looks. I might see if I've got a little bit of this color left in here. Maybe add some white and really gray it out a bit, and maybe add a little bit of that to the background. So this will be sort of the spots in front of our mountain areas, where we're kind of getting sort of off into the distance and a bit desaturated. I'm going to give my brush a good rinse, and then I'm going to grab some more yellow, some more white, and just a small touch of that burnt sienna. I really want a nice bright color here. And I'm going to put in some of these rock shapes. Maybe we have one kind of here, and one maybe right here, maybe some rocks sort of in the background there. And I'm going to come back into this burnt sienna and give it a bit of a shadow on the other sides, on the back sides. So we have a little bit of a difference in the values there. And then I am ready to put in some cacti. So I'm going to do a bit of a sort of double stroke. So I'm going to mix a green color here, and I'm going to put a little bit more burnt sienna down. I want it to be just ever so slightly toned down, and the orange tone in that burnt sienna will be a nice way to get that done. So this is going to be my shadowy side of the cactus. And then I'm going to keep whatever's left over in my brush, and I'm going to work on the highlight side, which I'm going to brighten up quite a bit with some more white and some more yellow and make it nice and warmed up. I'm going to add just a touch of the burnt sienna to that too, just to desaturate it a tiny bit. And I think that's a pretty good mix. I like the saturation more from this than from the real photo. I want to make it nice and bright, and I think this is a good mix. So I'm going to kind of scrape off my paintbrush a little bit. I'm going to grab my palette knife and just get some of the excess off. And then I'm going to rinse my brush. And then I'm going to do a double loaded brush for my cactus. And I can always add more yellow later, but this is how I'm going to do it. So on one side of my brush, I'm going to dip into the, we'll call it the highlight side. And then on the other side, I'm going to dip in for the shadow. And off sort of to the side, I'm just going to get my brush sort of loaded up, and keeping my highlight side to the right, I'm going to put down my first cactus. And I'm going to need to reload because I'm working with kind of a small brush, and I'm just going to keep that side going. Just like that. And we've got our highlights and our shadows kind of built in. So now I'm going to work on the first little arm, and I'm just being careful to make sure that my highlight stays on the same side. And I'm going to reload as much as I need to. So I'm going to do a couple of more, just like that. And we have our first cactus. I'm going to do the second cactus in here. So I'm going to load up my brush again. I'm starting to get a little low on my shadow color. I didn't really mix up enough of that, but hopefully I've got enough for my second cactus. And it's going to be in about the same area, and I'm going to have it come up straight this way and bring it back down. Just like that. And then I'm gonna re-dip into my colors, try to scoop up as much of that shadow color as I can, and get the last couple of little arms done. I'm gonna make these a little bit smaller, and the filbert brush is really great for this because it just has that natural curve at the end, so you can kind of double stroke it once in each direction and get a pretty crisp edge. So I'm going to stop messing with that, and I think now we can kind of go in to some more burnt sienna. And I'm going to mix it to tone down, get another shade of green. And I have not used my fan brush in quite a while, and I actually got it out to use it today. And I think I'm going to use that to do some finishing touches. So I'm rinsing off my filbert brush very well, and I'm going to grab my fan brush to make some grasses at the base of the cacti. So I'm just going to dip it in some water and get it into this green, and I'm just going to add some grassy shapes here. And this is going to be another nice texture element. I'm going to dip some more into that burnt sienna, get some darker colors here, and you can use it from the end, and you can also run it up the side. You can make some little grassy tufts or come straight up. And I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to add some white to this now and lighten it up quite a bit. Maybe even grab some of this yellow and just get some of the excess off. And come in here for some highlights. just like that. Maybe even grab a little bit more white here, a little bit more yellow with that white. I want to get some nice saturation down here. Not too much, but just enough where we've got some interesting marks. And I like that. That looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to rinse that brush well, and then I'm going to let this dry and go in for some mark making to finish it out. I'll be right back. All right, we are dry again, and I really love how this turned out. I don't want to do too much to it, but I do want to add a little bit more texture to these cacti. So I grabbed my 05 white jelly roll, and I am going to just do some simple lines. Now, what I'm going to do is use my light colored pen to do the highlight side and do some simple lines for the cacti. And then I'm going to grab my gray one out of here to do the shadow areas. So I'm just going to put in a few simple lines here so that we get some more contrast. And I'm going down the long way first, and then I'm going to go down these little arms. Just very simple. All right, I've got my white in. I might also add just a few little lines down here, but not much, and maybe a few little marks where we've got some of these rocks. I'm just going to give a few little highlights to those so they kind of peek out from behind, and I'm just going really lightly with it, just like that. So we have a couple of little breaks down here with some highlights, and then I'm going to go into my gray color here, and this is just another fine liner, and I'm going to put in the shadow lines down the cactus. So this might be one of my favorite art journal pages I've made in a while, and it's just simple shapes like we like to do, nothing major. But it's nice to have a photo reference sometimes, just to have something to look at to give you some ideas. And I think I'm going to add a couple little darker lines here just to get that other sort of deep value. And I'm trying to go over where I've got some of my darker grasses. So I'm not going over the highlight grasses, I'm going over the shadow grasses and just adding a little bit more depth. And it will help kind of separate some of these little plant areas. I like to imagine they're either like desert grasses or some kind of succulents, something like that. And I really love how this turned out. So I'm going to give you the close-up like usual, and I think we can call this good. Let me get this held up. Sorry for the light changes. It's been kind of a sunny day / cloudy at times. I think one of my favorite parts of this actually is where the paper towel texture is from the blotting. That just adds something so interesting to this. So I really love how this page turned out. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more, of course, subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Until next time, keep creating.